So, a key moment in Nigerian politics and the evolution of its democracy. People are voting this weekend in a crucial governorship ballot in the southwest state of Osun. It's a much anticipated vote, being the last such poll before the 2023 presidential election in just 6.5 months' time. So it could be a potential bellwether for 2023. There is therefore an uncertain, almost hesitant hope that it'll all turn out to be shipshape and seaworthy, assuming the Electoral Commission, INEC, can get on top of its logistical hurdles and the parties stick to the binding elements of the peace accord they signed. In the lead up to the vote, there was a debate on Arise News among some of the candidates, and there seems to be a measure of enthusiasm among the people of Osun, but it's not clear whether this will translate into a high voter turnout. Well, for more on this, let's cross live now to the Osun state capital, Osogbo, and speak to Austin Ibe, Senior Program Officer for the respected think tank, the Center for Democracy and Development, which is monitoring the election. Austin, thank you very much indeed for joining us. We hear that political parties in Osun state have signed a peace accord. You were there at that signing, from what I understand. What is the object of the peace accord? What is it aiming to forestall or prevent?
Okay, thanks, Charles, and it's great to be on your show. What an exciting moment. Yes, we're right here in Osun State. Earlier today, there was all 15 political parties and their candidate gathered in the central location where they had to sign a peace accord to commit to peace ahead of the elections, during the elections, and after the elections. So the peace accord actually began in the lead up to the 2015 elections, where there was a lot of tension in the ecosystem of Nigeria, and some kind of whether then former President Jonathan was going to cede power if he loses the election. So there was some form of agreement by all stakeholders, particularly electoral stakeholders, to have an ambience where we need to sit together and then have a conversation that whether or not you lose an election, you must stand for peace. And that now late the UN Secretary General Kofi Annan was present in that meeting on the 15th of January 2015. So fast forward to today, this is more like a state elections, and the Peace Committee has done this over a long period of time, starting with the Edo gubernatorial elections up to Ondo. But the whole essence is that where you have tension, Osun is one of those states where there's a high level of tension. If you move around the city of Osogbo and around Ide and Ife, you will see some level of violent ambience. You see posters that have been pulled down, a billboard of campaigners, of political campaigns that have been destroyed, and that's its early warning for violence. So today, the political parties and their candidate had to meet, including the governor of the state. Just so you know, everyone know that there are two of these major political parties, the All Progressive Congress and the People's Democratic Party. You move around the city, you see posters being pulled down or destroyed, and like I said, it's an early warning. So how do we ensure that these flag bearers, these contenders, will be able to manage their supporters? That was the essence of today's meeting, and it was very useful that each of those candidates had a handshake, which is very symbolic and of course very strategic, had a handshake, and some of them also had a hug, a friendly hug, or what you may call a peace hug. And that was very important, that sending the right message to their supporters that if my principal, if my a candidate would do this publicly, then I should do the same. So we expect that there will be peace in Osun election July the 16th of 2022.
Right. Okay, well, thanks for that summary. And is this peace accord then likely to encourage voters to come out en masse and vote, knowing that a peace accord is in place?
So we can use one as to correlate turnout of voters. Peace accord is just one of the low-hanging fruits, I'll say that, because there are other issues. And you know there are governance failure in our system. Democracy is no longer adding value to our democratic architecture. So what that means is that there are people who no longer value elections. So we need to encourage more people, even though they know that if the election is violent, they won't turn up. So that peace accord will handle that aspect of it. But there are many other dimensions. So the governors needed to answer to the yearnings of people. Candidates needed to, or elected officials needed to commit to their promises for election, so when they are elected, they eventually do all of those. For example, infrastructural development, issues around road infrastructure, railway infrastructure, all of the salaries you need to pay, and all of the pensions now you have to take care of, and the schools, hospitals, and all you have to make provision for. If those are not happening, it is reducing the sentiment of Nigerians. Maybe coming down to Osun, someone told me that why will I vote in an election? I said, no, it's your right. He said, what kind of right is that? And I said, no, it's your right. Sincerely, let's put sentiment aside. Let's talk about it. He said, no, we need to put sentiment that, come on, in the last 4 years, he hasn't seen XYZ. So why would I vote? So it took over 10 minutes having that conversation for this one fellow to eventually agree to vote in an election. So you imagine there are a lot more of those individuals who are conscious of his environment, who are not happy with the governance architecture, who are not happy with the dividends of democracy. And that is a huge challenge. Whereas violence is key, however, there are other externalities that have to do with high turnout. I believe, with the kind of things we have seen before the vote, before the peace accord earlier today, a lot of people have said they were going to vote, and they have committed that they would vote. And we expect that we may have a higher turnout compared to Ekiti State.
Right. Okay. I was going to ask you what the issues are that have dominated the campaign as we head towards the election at the weekend, but you've kind of answered that question. So my question now is, what's your assessment of the readiness of INEC to conduct this election?
Wow, I'll give it to INEC, even though I won't give it 100%, but I probably will not give it about 98.9% that INEC is ready. It's ready beyond our anticipation. For the first time in our historical contest, we're going to be having persons with disability serving as ad hoc personnel. I mean, this is the first time. In Ekiti, we saw a huge inclusion level. We have, in many polling units, we have women ad hoc officials. And now in Osun election, INEC has said they will pull up more. They want to be more inclusive. So persons with disability will be serving as trained INEC or ad hoc staff. Beyond that, there's another very important information that I think the public would like to know. So for the very first time too, INEC will be interested in the number of PVC collected. So by Thursday, which is tomorrow, PVC collection would have been over, and by Friday, INEC will release formally the number of PVC collected per polling unit. 3,763 of those will be released officially. So when it has to do with maybe at some point we have in 2018 election, where election ran to inconclusive poll, and the judgment for the decision of that inconclusive poll was reliance on registered voters. Many a time there are over 1.9 million voters in Osun State, but if maybe let's assume that 1.5 million collected their PVC, 400 of those are not part of the electoral process. We can use those 400 to determine the course of action. So what INEC has then said is that if at any point there's a need for a margin of vote between the first runner-up and the winner and the second, they'll determine based on the number of PVC collected per polling unit. If, for example, polling unit 1 is the issue of concern where polling was cancelled on election day, you need to rely on the number of PVC collected, not the total registered voters. I think if that is a very huge one that we think we need to commend INEC for, because it's weird where you have to rely on registered voters. In many instances, There are folks who have traveled out of Osun State. There are folks who have died. There are folks who have moved on out of the state. They hadn't collected their PVC. You cannot judge decision on those individuals. And like I said, also yesterday we had a stakeholders meeting. It was the climax of all stakeholders meeting of INEC. The INEC has met with all of the stakeholders, including observers, because we are observing this election. And it is one word. INEC is committed to credible election. And I want to assume that from the wordings of the chairman of the INEC, Professor Mahmoud Yakubu, we are ready. And I want to say we, including all of us, because having seen what happened in Ekiti, we should do more in Osun State. So with all we're saying, tomorrow, by the deadline of the collection of PVCs, we should be headed towards Friday, where INEC will release for us the list, fragmenting those lists per polling unit. It is very important we do that.
Well, we're going to keep a very close eye.
And just to add, just to quickly add, Charles.
Very, very briefly.
Okay, just to quickly add, all the setting materials are already in town. And uniquely, it is not at the Central Bank of Nigeria. It is somewhere in INEC office where it is very secured, and we are happy they're there. So by tomorrow, we'll be observing those setting materials at the INEC office.
Well, coming from you, who is an independent election monitor, that's rather encouraging. I want to say thank you very much indeed, Austin Ibe, who is a senior program officer for the think tank, the Center for Democracy and Development, and the group, of course, one of the groups monitoring that election. And he was talking to me there live from the Osun State capital, Osogbo.